Good morning, everyone. It's August 13th, 2026. I'm going to call the business meeting of the Governing Board of the South Florida Water Management District to order. First on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would stand and face the flag and say the pledge with me, I'd appreciate it. Vice Chair Wagner, Mr. Butler, and Mr. Martinez are not going to be able to join us today. Colonel Roman and Mr. Steinley are participating remotely. Are you both on? Colonel Roman?
I'm here, Mr.
Good
Chair.
morning. Mr. Steinley?
Hi, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Good morning. For those board members who are here, I'm going to ask that you make sure the microphone is on and that you speak into the mic so the online attendees can hear you. And for those board members who are on Zoom, I can't see you when you raise your hand. So if you want to speak or ask questions, please call out your name and I will acknowledge you. Members of the public on Zoom who wish to address the board can use the raise your hand feature. If members of the public are having any trouble and need help, please go to the website sfwmd.gov and click the Ask Us button at the top of the page. If you're using a phone and you'd like to comment, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. And as a courtesy to others who wish to speak, members of the public are asked to comment only once on each topic. We'll take public comment first from those who are here in person and submitted a comment card. Those will be followed by you with the raised hands on Zoom. And now for my favorite part of the meeting, employee recognitions. Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, so our August 2026 Employee of the Month is Mike Cheek, Section Leader, Public Use and Wildlife Unit. So Mike has been with us for almost 2 decades, and currently he's kind of the lead for the recreation aspects of the Water Management District. He manages a lot of the projects we have and the areas we have for public recreation. Before he even came to the district, he was into this kind of conservation and recreation because he was in the Peace Corps in Ecuador, where he was helping them with natural resource management and ecotourism. So he came with experience to the district, and boy, he's been doing a great job for us. He is essentially the tip of the spear for our recreation activities in the district. If you've been to our recreation public forum, he is the highlight of those recreation meetings because he gives an update on all the activities and partnerships we have at the Water Management District. He's been helping manage all the replacement of our public restrooms. And every time we come up with a new project and implement a new project, he's there helping the design to install new access points and recreation features with every project, whether it's a SERP or NEEP or any of those types of projects. He's there helping us make sure we have sustainable access. But the reason he's being recognized as our Employee of the Month is because not only do I recognize that, but also external partners recognize that as well. He's been recognized by the Florida Paddling Trails Association for his partnership with DEP in establishing the Kissimmee River Paddling Trail. And just last month at the Florida Airboat Association annual meeting, he was recognized as the agency rep for promoting and expanding public access. Of all the agencies we have in the state, Mike Cheek was the one that they recognized with that. And I even have a picture for him he can put on his desk of him receiving that recognition at the dinner. Honestly, it makes us very proud at the Water Management District that they recognize us, and Mike Cheek is really part of that. So he is a conservationist. He is an outdoorsman himself. So in his mind, he has the perfect job. I asked his wife. She said, yes, he has the perfect job in his mind. And he is out there doing the outdoor activities. He knows what it takes to make sustainable access, and he does that for us amazingly well. And that's why he's our Employee of the Month. Thank you, Mike. August 2026 Team of the Month is the first of a kind 1043B agreement team, which has Mayor Cruz Fincher, Jennifer Leeds, Alexa Monash, Savannah Middlebush, John Mitnick, Mindy Parrott, and Leslie Waugh. And I would also like to recognize the folks at the Corps of Engineers who helped make this happen too. And that's Adele Braun, Johanna Anderson, Brooks Moore, and Mike Collis. So this is probably the first and last time I will recognize anyone up here that sits in this circle. But there was a lot of hands-on activity when it came to managing this agreement. And a year ago, the governor signed that the landmark agreement to expedite the EAA reservoir and then transfer projects to us with federal funds. And here we are a year later signing these agreements. Now, let me give you perspective on that. Usually when we launch on signing an agreement with the Corps of Engineer, it's an 18-month process. And that's for standard agreements, just because of the chain that they have to go through. This team got together, they knew the urgency, and they got into a room. I saw them, I would walk by the room, and they were in there with the agreements on the screen, hammering through language. It looked miserable. But they started and finished that process in a 2-month period. And here we are today, launching this project. And in fact, this month, the agreements are signed. This month, we're launching the first activities under this agreement to build the last pump station for the EAA reservoir project. And before the end of the year, we'll be launching that for the Blue Shanty Flowway after one more report the Corps has to write. So it's one of those things that doesn't happen much. I was just at a national meeting and of all local sponsors across the country, and they were all asking about this. They are all asking about it. They look to us to say, how did you do it? How are we doing it? And it was this team that actually made it happen. So it was a great effort. We are recognized nationally, and that's why they're our Team of the Month. Congratulations. Yes, you have to walk up here and get your picture taken.
Now you'll have a spare, or you can pass it on. Now you'll have a spare, or you can pass it on.
All right, Mindy, don't go anywhere. I've got one 25-year service anniversary, and that's Mindy Parrott, Principal Policy Analyst for the Division of Ecosystem Restoration. She came to us in 2001, and she went into the permitting program in the regulatory division, basically working on both ERP, environmental resource permitting and consumptive use permitting, and also doing wetland delineation. And Mindy's one of those people that jumps in and really learns everything, because it didn't take long before in 2008 she was promoted to the supervisor. And then shortly after that, she was the district's representative for the statewide environmental resource permitting rule when they adopted that, where she was our rep. She helped craft that statewide rule, including the United Mitigation Assessment Method, UMAM. So she got super smart in regulatory and then said, okay, I'm done. So she went over to SERP, and that's where she's been ever since, and she continues to serve, obviously. And she is currently our Principal Federal Policy Analyst, which she took that job in 2021. And if you need to know anything about SERP, you just ask Mindy. She knows it all, ins and outs, and she knows how to navigate the Corps of Engineers, right? And when we're trying to think about how to do something, she knows the exact way to navigate in and through the Corps of Engineers. She knows who to talk to and how to get things done within that. And let me tell you, the South Florida Water Management District is always on the cutting edge of federal projects when it comes to ecosystem restoration. When it comes to federal projects authorized under WRDA, we're always doing it differently. We're building it. We're changing policies here, left and right, because we do it fast and we do it well, right? And so Mindy's there helping us navigate that every single time. I think half the letters I signed to the Corps of Engineers she has crafted, maybe all of them actually, I don't know. But you know, she is one of those resources. She was there in regulatory for us, making it happen, and now she's in CERT making it happen. And she will continue to do that, thank goodness, as we continue on this new frontier under CERP. And so, Mindy, thank you for your 25 years of service.
Well, thanks very much for that, Drew. We'll move on to agenda revisions. Molly, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. Now we'll move to abstentions by board members, and I'm going to poll the board, and I'll start with you, Mr. Spotswood. Do you have any
I have none.
abstentions? Mr. Bergeron, do you have any?
None.
Thank you. I have none. Mr. Hurley?
I have none.
Colonel Roman?
I have none.
Thank you. Mr. Steinley?
None.
Thank you. We'll move to the approval of the minutes. This is the July 9th, 2026 meeting. Does anyone have any changes to those minutes? And if not, could I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call that question. Mr. Spotswood?
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Colonel Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Steinley?
Yes.
Thanks. That passes unanimously. We'll move to Mr. Bartlett, Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a brief one today. So we did submit our tentative 26-27 budget to the governor and the legislature. And so I just want to thank Candy Heater and all of her staff for putting that thing together. It's a $1.6 billion budget. And the reason it feels a little high is because now it has federal funds in it as we move forward with the final parts of the EA Reservoir and the Blue Shanty Flowway. So it's a good budget that's up there for their review, and I just appreciate the staff for making that happen. It's not easy. Every August, we give a report on the BMP program in the Everglades agricultural area. The water year 26 is the reporting year that we're doing, which ended May 1st. And go ahead, Molly. And they have achieved their goal. The statutory goal is 25%, and they got 65% reduction from baseline for their BMP efforts in that program. And many of you know I used to work for EPA, and I see environmental efforts across the country, and this honestly is a one-of-a-kind effort in putting clean water in the Everglades, and the EAA farmers are putting their part into it with this kind of reduction. And they reduce, and then they send it to the STAs, and we polish off the rest. And so I want to give you sort of what it's looked like over time. You see the baseline period on the left, and what this graph represents is the inputs into the water conservation areas. Water Conservation Area 1, Water Conservation Area 2, and Water Conservation Area 3. So you see in time, with the BMP implementation and then the early STAs and then restoration strategies, it's made a tremendous difference in putting clean water into the Everglades. So you can see it with the inputs into the Everglades, but you can also see it in the Everglades itself, where in the baseline period, you saw a very few little green dots, which means that it's meeting the water quality standards. And in the latest 5-year period, you see a whole lot more green dots, little green dots, which means there's much cleaner water in the Everglades. And now we're starting that period where we have the limit on our stormwater treatment areas. We finished the refurbishments, we've finished building all the projects. So I look forward to seeing more green dots pop up on that screen. And I'd just like to say there's a lot of investments, a lot of effort, a lot of science that goes into our environmental efforts. And when you see the results, it's good to, let people know that their advocacy, their investments, everything is paying off in our environmental efforts, in particular with putting clean water in the Everglades. So the other thing I'd like to report on while I'm here is kind of some of the efforts for helping Lake Okeechobee while it's been low. We presented a plan to you in January, and so we've gotten a lot done, and I wanted to highlight what we've been able to accomplish for Lake Okeechobee while it's been low. There were 2 boat locks that were not filled in, but had plenty of muck that had accumulated in those boat locks. And so this is the before picture for the S-135 boat lock. We've done 2 boat locks. I'm just going to show you one. And this is the boat lock before with the muck and the green growing out of the muck on either side. This is during. They dewatered and scooped and scooped and scooped to get all the muck out. And this is afterwards. And there's a beautiful lock going into Lake Okeechobee. So that is no longer a source going into Lake Okeechobee because they removed the muck on that boat lock and one other boat lock. Job finished on the 2 boat locks. We also, while the lake was low, can access areas a lot better. And there was a Brazilian pepper and Indian rosewood infestation on the northwest part of Lake Okeechobee. So our teams have gotten in there and treated it using our methods, with very minimal herbicide to take care of that Brazilian pepper and Indian rosewood populations. Good job, team, for getting that done. And then, of course, we launched on prescribed fire. The team was always at the ready, always applying for permits to put fire in Lake Okeechobee, and got a number of prescribed burns done. Amounting to, I think it was about 2,500 acres of prescribed burns. And then, of course, we had the wildfire in the northwest side as well. So a good bit of Lake Okeechobee has been burned. The teams are still at the ready. The lake is still on the low side, so just looking for the right conditions. Now that it's wet season, it's pretty hard to find those right conditions, but they're still at the ready in case that materializes. So a lot of fire been put on Lake Okeechobee this dry season into this wet season. And then, of course, we have a massive amount of plantings. Between us and the FWC, we had 65,000 plants planted. I went out there out of Clewiston to look at it. That's Commissioner Iglesias in the upper right picture. Planting, he's not a professional. The professional's watching him do his best. And they're out there planting. And so we went to some areas that naturally recruited, and it looked incredible. The eelgrass was thick. These efforts trying to jumpstart that ecosystem to get it healthy again. So a lot of plantings have occurred. And then the massive muck removal effort. And I get this question a lot. How is this compared to the last time in 2007 when we did a muck removal effort? And we helped FWC. They had the funds and managed the contract. We cleared the roads, had the disposal area, everything ready for them to be successful. And so they just wrapped up the muck removal process. But if you compare it to 2007, we're about double the amount of muck and vegetation that grows out of the muck in the removal effort this time in 2026 than what happened in 2007. So it was they were ready. They got to it and got a lot of muck out of the lake. And so we look forward to the lake rising and filling in that area so that we can see the nice plants come out and see the restored ecosystem for that area as well. So a lot of work. The lake is still low, so we're still looking at more exotics removal. There's a nut rush population out there that we're looking at, and so it's the lake's still low, so we're still looking for the opportunity. But right now we've gotten a lot done. I wanted to brag about a little bit. Us and FWC, by the way. FWC has been a great partner in this. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Thanks, Mr. Barlow. Does anyone have any comments or questions for Drew? Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll move now to general public comment. If you're here to comment on a specific agenda item, we ask that you hold your comment until we reach that item on our agenda. This comment period is for general comments not related to agenda items. Public comments on consent, that's number 11 on the agenda, and public comments for the discussion agenda will be heard immediately after that presentation. I believe there's only one. The public did have an opportunity to provide written comments prior to this meeting, and we did not receive any e-comments. And we'll go now to public comment if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll hear first from Ben Olson, followed by Gil Smart.
Good morning. I'm going to have to use both public comment periods today. Monday marked 4 years. 4 years that the WERP Region 2 landowners have been involved in WERP. And I am so proud to say that in less than 1 month's time, on September 3rd, the land steward meeting, something my neighbors and I have spent just about 3 years advocating for, will finally take place. Representative members of private landowners will sit at the table as equals in a long-form discussion with members of the Seminole and Miccosukee tribal representatives, water management staff, and now FWC staff, as well as FWC Commissioner Josh Kellum, collectively the land stewards of the West Feeder Basin. I went to the FWC Commission meeting last week, and I invited Commissioner Kellum to join us, but originally I wasn't intending on driving the 1,200-mile round trip to Panama City Beach. The reason I'm telling you this, Governing Board, is that we have yet another disturbing twist in the tale of WERP. You see, I've come to learn that myself and dozens of other conservationists, environmentalists, influencers, whatever term you choose to use, are being illegally tracked by the FWC law enforcement. In April of 2024, just after I released my determination of historical flow paths from the West Feeder Basin report, the report that Governing Member Alligator Ron frequently refers to, FWC illegally accessed my personal information on the DAVID system, the Driver and Vehicle Information Database, under a false claim of criminal investigation. They searched me 14 times. 14 times. No criminal investigation exists. The original narrative was that these individuals were making threats online, and that's why the FWC was tracking them. I don't use social media. And I was also neutral on the bear hunt, the other claimed reason. No, my crime is advocating for panther habitat and openness in Everglades restoration, which can get you on a government watch list in this free state of ours alongside dozens of others. And frankly, not to bury the lead any further, when all of this is said and done, we are going to uncover that it is hundreds that are being tracked. I put in a sunshine request for communications between the FWC leadership and FWC law enforcement specific to myself. They informed me yesterday that there are over 2,000 emails in just 4 years. That's why we need transparency. Add that to the 17 years the Department of Interior wants to take to release WERP-related documents to me. Now more than ever, Governing Board, we need accountability, transparency, and openness. I commend the district on the agreement to expedite Everglades restoration projects with the Corps, but with expedition comes mistakes. That's human nature. We need to get out ahead of those potential mistakes by making this process wholly transparent, open, and inclusive of all knowledge sources, including private landowners and engaged stakeholders in the footprints. The land steward meeting will be the start of that. I don't have my flock data yet, so I can't verify in my personal situation for now, but almost immediately after the David searches, individuals are discovering that FWC law enforcement are using flock cameras to track their every whereabouts. But the most disturbing aspect I learned of just a few days ago. You see, one individual who was illegally tracked has found out that their spouse was searched illegally on the David system by FWC as well. They're going after families, and based on the timeline of when I was searched, I'm essentially positive that my dad's David audit log is going to show that he was tracked too. The disgusting abuse of power will be addressed, but I thank you guys for working with us, and I'm committed to working with your staff to solve the Feeder Canal Basin Water Quality Program, which I will speak more about in the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Next, we'll hear from Gil Smart, followed by Jake Voitik.
Morning, Governing Board members. My name is Gil Smart. I'm here today representing Friends of the Everglades, based in Stewart and founded in 1969 by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Last night in Stewart, we held the first of what will be a series of town hall meetings across South Florida to talk about our Rescue the River of Grass movement to acquire more land in the EAA, to finish the job of Everglades restoration by providing more water storage and treatment, restoring the natural flow of clean water to the Everglades and Florida Bay, and preventing harmful discharges to the northern estuaries. The event was hosted by our friends at Florida Oceanographic Society. There were more than 60 people in attendance. There's going to be another town hall in Miami on October 30th, then another scheduled in Sanibel later. As shown by the turnout, there's significant public interest in the Rescue the River of Grass plan. Our online petition now has just under 40,000 signatures. And increasingly, people seem to understand that for all the progress made, we've got a long way to go before we truly finish the job of Everglades restoration. The good news is we have a unique opportunity to do just that. The money's available. Voter-approved land acquisition dollars will yield about $1.3 billion annually for the next 8 years. There's growing political support for the idea. Our sister organization, Vote Water, asked some 300 political candidates in South Florida to sign a Rescue the River of Grass pledge to support the program, and some 36 have, including Congressman Brian Mast, sitting state legislators, and county commission candidates in St. Lucie, Martin, Palm Beach, and Lee counties. At Friends of the Everglades, we've begun saying that all roads lead to the Rescue the River of Grass, meaning that any viable path to Everglades restoration requires acquisition of land in the EAA. So I was curious to see the discussion item today on today's agenda regarding the supply and delivery of plants to the STAs. Interesting stuff and necessary if we're going to maximize the efficiency of the STAs to remove nutrients and ultimately meet the QBO. Everyone hopes this type of intensive vegetation management can help get those phosphorus numbers down, but we may be asking for miracles. Bottom line, we need more land, just as we call for in Rescue the River of Grass. All roads lead to rescue. We appreciate the governing board members who have taken the time to discuss the plan and extend an open invitation for those who have not had a chance to sit down with us. The movement is growing, and we invite you to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Next, we'll hear from Jake Foytik, followed by Newton Cook.
Good morning, Governing Board. Jake Foytik, Assistant Director of Government and Community Affairs at the Florida Farm Bureau Federation. It's been a minute since I came up here and talked, but Farm Bureau is the state's largest general ag organization. We've got about 130,000 member families statewide. We advocate and represent farmers, large and small, all across our state. We've got well over 300 commodities that we grow commercially in the state of Florida, which is so unique from anywhere else in the nation that it's pretty neat. And nowhere's more unique than our farmers in the EAA. And I'm going to pile on to what Drew mentioned during his director's report, but our phosphorus reduction numbers, incredible numbers. Again, astounding at 65% this year, more than double the 25% required under the Everglades Forever Act. It's just really unique and special, and something that I think needs to be talked about. The EAA, as you guys know, it's the winter vegetable capital of the world. Up to 180 million Americans all across the eastern seaboard look to the EAA every winter for a whole host of fresh vegetables: sweet corn, radishes, lettuce, cabbage, green beans, celery. We're even growing some rice down there now. So we've got a lot of sugarcane, yes, of course, but it really is the vegetable and the salad bowl capital of the United States during these winter months. So just wanted to tout that, and these BMPs are not implemented willy-nilly. They're science-based best management practices that are very intentional in their applications and very specific region-wide and farm-wide. So I wanted to thank the farmers for all that they're doing to improve our water quality, and thank the district for you guys monitoring and reporting on this. It's so important. It really is a team effort between our farmers and all the stakeholders involved. But the district, the farmers, Department of Agriculture, and UF-IFRS for coming up with a lot of these BMPs and doing the science behind them. Really just shows that agriculture and water quality and conservation can go hand in hand. So thank you guys for reporting on it and monitoring it, and thanks to our farmers for implementing it and making it happen. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Foytik. Next, we'll hear from Newton Cook, followed by Mark Perry.
Need to move this thing a little bit like that way. All right, first thing I want to do is say congratulations to Mike G, because this district has the best land management group. and that I have to work with. Is that a nice way of saying it without putting the others down? But seriously, there's about 1 million acres out there, and these people have a big job to make sure that no telling how many hundreds of thousands of people are out there, and they all go home safely, quite frankly, and they have a great day. So that's important. Hard to believe, but duck season starts in about 6 weeks. So we're already looking at the SDAs, and everybody is pretty excited. Lake Okeechobee, we continue to be very lucky and not have any rain or storm or anything like that. And I enjoy seeing the burning, of course, and enjoy seeing the muck removal. But guys and ladies, let me tell you, we're not doing 1/1000th of what is needed. I mean, I always say, well, scale that up. You know, we did muck removal, right? Scale it up and then figure out what it's going to cost. Whew. Every time you do any kind of experiment on the lake and say, well, we're going out here and we're cleaning this and we're doing that, I always ask the question, scale it up. Because when you scale it up, guess what? You ain't going to do it. There's no way. There's not enough money in Washington, D.C. to do that work. The secret is, let's stop the stuff from coming into the lake, and at least 50 years from now, 2 or 3 generations behind some of us, they'll be able to say, boy, they did the right thing back then. They stopped all this phosphorus coming into the lake, which ends up going into the Everglades, which ends up going south or east or west. The problem is not east, west, or south. The problem is north. And we spent 20 years, I have, standing here, telling people, you can't fix it until you stop the junk coming into the lake. You just can't. It's impossible. You're wasting your time and money. And until we clean the lake up, which we've already got 50 years of legacy, everything south of the lake, you're wasting your time and money. And I don't know what to say. We're not even addressing the problem that we have today in order to keep the problem from being around 50 years later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Next, we'll hear from Mark Perry. Then we'll move over to our virtual participants with their hands raised.
Morning, Governing Board. Mark Perry, Florida Oceanographic Society. It's an incredible time that we're going through right now, and it's awesome. I want to just comment too on the of course, your agenda. You get the Northern Everglades and Estuaries Protection Plan updates along with SERP updates. In the plan for NEP, there's a spotlight for the C-23-24 STA. And many of us were out there. I was honored to be able to say a few words too, along all the other dignitaries there who worked on this project for many years. I want to say that it's actually ahead of schedule on the integrated delivery schedule. It wasn't due to completion until the end of this year or the last quarter, and we're ahead of schedule on that. And to me, that is really amazing. But we've got a lot of work to do. Of course, if you look at the schedule, this was authorized under WRDA of 2007. We all went to ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings, everything kind of moving this along. But when you stand there and look out at this STA completed and getting ready to be used, it's very gratifying because we've worked on this for many years, but we've got a lot of work to go. We got to complete this IRL project with all these other components and get that operational, and that'll really do a lot of good. Those were 2 out of the main original 68 components, and we're working on that good. So kudos to the district and the Corps and working together on that. Of course, you heard me talk about Northern Everglades Estuaries Protection Plan a lot. I'm really, really concerned and interested that we get together with the other agencies. Y'all as a district have keep monitoring the runoff and monitoring all these 3 watersheds. And as the data shows, it's 3 times higher than the TMDL. And we've required those reductions to be made in each of the watersheds by the stakeholders. They're not being met. Early in January this year, DEP required that all stakeholders within there give them projects that would meet the TMDL by those given dates. And we haven't heard, whether those projects are actually going to do it, whether they're happening. So I encourage and implore the district to hold another workshop, even just with the three agencies, and just let us sit in and listen in. But it's really important that you coordinate with them and get going. The regional projects like the C2324 and other projects are going to do a great job, but we've got to get those reductions within each of those watersheds to really make it work. So I encourage you to continue on and press on with the TMBL. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Next, we'll hear from Nicholas Trenchina, followed by Don DeMott.
Good morning. It's an honor for me to talk to you people. I'm Nicholas Tranchina. I'm the contractor for the boat locks. And I spoke last week, and I guess you guys had a meeting, but I wasn't invited to it, so you didn't hear both sides of this argument. My concern is the insurance that the district is asking me to sign an amendment now to carry marine liability insurance, which I have been carrying for 3 previous years. But on the pre-bid documents in 2023, there was only commercial liability listed. And I told the district then that I discovered we need marine liability, but they said it wasn't required. But I've been carrying it these 3 years at a cost coming out of my profit. So I asked for mediation. The district is denying me a mediation, which the contract says I'm entitled to have mediation. So the district is breaching the contract, then my performance should be excused with no penalty, and I should be able to get out of this contract. It's an honor for me to run the boat locks, but with this problem I'm having with the insurance, it's very expensive. It's the required insurance to have. I don't see why the district can't sit down and explain to me why they want me to sign this amendment requiring the insurance without compensation. The previous contractor before I showed up didn't have marine liability insurance. They were running it with janitorial insurance, and she had a problem. She got caught in 2017, and insurance companies are aware of that. I also run the boat locks for St. John's Water Management District, the 3 boat locks they have there. And they had commercial liability in their pre-bid documents. And when I told them that they were wrong, marine liability needs to be required, well, they just called South Florida Water Management District their big brother. And South Florida said only commercials required. But now St. John's reached out to their insurance company, Brown & Brown, one of the largest in the state, and they said that marine liability is their appropriate insurance for the boat locks. So please allow me to have a mediation so we can solve this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Trenchina. Next, we'll hear from Don DeMott.
Good morning. How are you?
We hear you.
So, a couple things I wanted to bring to your attention. A lot of talk around spraying for years and years and years. Many participants, many people involved with our fresh water have talked about how damaging herbicide spraying can be. And that's traditionally pushed back on about how cost effective it is. Well, there's now some documentation that's been produced by Stetson University along with the St. John's River Keepers. I invite you all to take a look at that document. I forwarded it last month up to the South Florida Water Management District. I hope it was sent around to the board members. I've also forwarded it to FWC. This is something that a lot of people continue to talk about. Mr. Cook, just an absolute fantastic advocate for Lake Okeechobee and freshwater, has talked about it. Many folks keep talking about it. And now we have a document that will back that up, what we're seeing, right? And so I invite you to look at that. Secondly, I'd like to bring to your attention for the second year in a row, Bassmaster Magazine has failed to identify Lake Okeechobee, right? The single biggest lake we have in the US, right? Right there in the center of our state, the one that we're all responsible for as a top 100 bass lake, right? So that to me goes back to the challenges that we've had with high water storms, but again, this continued spraying. So I invite you all to let's get serious about Lake Okeechobee. Let's let the grass start to grow. I think Newton Cook said it best earlier when he said we're probably about 1/1000th of the way there. I would agree with that fully. And let's get serious about turning Lake Okeechobee into the fishery and duck hunting mecca that it used to be, and it certainly can be. And with that, I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Demott. Mr. Chairman, we have no additional general public comments.
Well, thank you all very much for your comments. We'll move now to a board comment, and I'll start to my right with Mr. Spotswood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to reiterate, Drew and the team, good job, good work, jumping in, get done what we can on the lake. Burned a lot, moved a lot of muck. At the same time, Newt, hear you. We need to figure out how to do more, and we spent some time internally talking about that and how we're gonna get better prepared for next year. So we're working on a plan, and we'll be talking to you about that. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, I'll circle back at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Spotswood. Mr. Bergeron.
I always have something to say, Mr. Chairman. And I want to start out saying what a great chairman you've been. The courtesy you show to the public is impeccable, and it's been an honor to sit up here for 8 years on making sure the future of Florida has quality of life, and obviously planned growth. That's the key, and jobs are important, and the preservation of our natural resources, which are impeccable. Because when you look at the state of Florida, we're so blessed to have the weather, the natural resources, the fishing capital of the world, the boating capital of the world, a quality of life, protecting our environment, and jobs and economical growth. And it's quite a balance, but Florida can be an example to the rest of the world that we can have it all. And I can't tell you how honored I've been to sit up here for 8 years. Getting into the Tamiami Trail that I talk a lot about, we're making great progress. And for the first time since 1915, as we cut the Everglades in half, completed in 1928, probably one of the largest dams in the United States of America. We are making progress to connect the natural flow of water from Orlando, Boggy Creek, for 200 miles to Florida Bay. I really want to thank our staff that's worked with our federal partners, the Park Service, the Interior, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the Corps. It's a team effort to make this connection. I think it's important and that we accelerate the Blue Shanty. We've already started a portion of that, and I know that that connection is extremely important. I want to compliment our staff for west of the L-28, the final piece of natural flow, 1 million acre feet on the west side of the Tamiami Trail. I know we've got modeling, and I think Drew had mentioned maybe by December of this year be able to let a contract that 1 million acre feet on the west side goes into Lossman Slough and on to the 10,000 Islands. And for the first time since 1915, and all these projects that we've built over the last 26 years, starting in 2000, this will be the biggest benefit through the global system. It will benefit the Central Everglades, Everglades National Park, Big Cypress, Fakahatchee, Picayune, Panther Refuge for equalization of water levels with shared adversity and shared impacts through this global system. It benefits the northern Everglades as well. This will stop the cumulative backups that's impacted north of the trail and stop seagrass from dying in Florida Bay. And I know I sound like a broken record because I bring this up, but this is a big step. And I want to thank all the stakeholders, their dedication and commitment, because it's all about we. You hear me say that a lot. But we're on the threshold of the biggest benefits, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. And I want to thank the governor, his leadership, and all our legislators that's given us the financial wherewithal to continue to restore the Everglades, and based upon the leadership of our governor, and I can remember 8 years ago when he went into the Everglades with me, and I could see his vision, developing a vision, understanding how important this is to all of South Florida, 10 million people, and the future of future generations. And so also want to compliment our staff for Lake Okeechobee taking advantage of this drought. A lot of this work can't be done in a heavy rain year. The lake is the heart of the Everglades. And I will say that we have the greatest staff in the world. And I've sat on a lot of boards, a lot of commissions, and served the people of Florida for a long time. But you have stepped up to the largest environmental restoration ever attempted in the history of the world. And I can't say how proud I am of this organization and all of our stakeholders. And I will end this, will say, long live the Everglades.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a lot other than just to thank and recognize the Everglades Foundation had a really nice event on Friday commemorating a speech that former Senate President Joe Negron gave. He gave the speech to a crew outside of Stewart who were there really in frustration during the really bad algae bloom that happened back then. And that was ultimately a catalyst that led to the Senate Bill 10 being passed, which really put the EAA reservoir sort of on the map and really got that going. And so that was a nice event. Had pretty much all the stakeholders that were involved at the time, during, and since there to sort of recognize and also remind us that, you know, still lots of stuff we still have to do. But it made all of us who remember 2016 like it was yesterday feel really old and recognize how fast time goes. Yeah, that was nice. Thanks.
Thank you. And Colonel Roman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to highlight one thing this morning. Each month, the staff puts together an update on the interagency efforts for the Northern Everglades and Estuaries Protection Program, and it's in our board packet. And this has become a very informative progress report. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the team that's working on this and puts this together each month, because it's become such a has so much substance in it each month and brings everyone up to date on this important program. And this month it talks about BOMA. We've reached the 1 year milestone for the BOMA equalization and the equalization basin in conjunction in this 80-acre facility. And I would ask everyone to take a look at this important report and take a look at it each month as we make progress to achieving some of our goals. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Steinle.
No comment. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Sure. I'll close up by saying I will reiterate what my colleague said about the taking advantage of the low lake level. I really appreciate the fact that staff has gotten out and demucked and burned and done what they can on the lake. Nobody likes the drought, but we may as well take advantage of it. I hear Mr. DeMott loud and clear. He's talking about the incredible potential of Lake Okeechobee, both ecologically and from an economic standpoint, and that is absolutely true, and we need to get the lake healthy again. One of the things I get asked about a lot on my side, on the southwest coast, is what's going on, how are we doing with the C-43 reservoir? So maybe next month or the month after, if we could have either a report on it, or you could talk about it in your executive director's report, just to let people know sort of, you've told me, but we are trying to fill it. We don't have enough water. We're waiting for a little rain, which we will get eventually, but to say something publicly, I think would be helpful. It's been a year or so, and people on our side particularly are very interested in that project. It's something we're all really proud of. And Drew, on the that 140 or the 1043B agreement team, I just want to say congratulations to you, both our staff and the Corps staff. It's amazing what can be done with good leadership and when people want to get things done, and things don't have to take years when they can take months. So congratulations for that, and thank you very much. We'll move now to consent. Is there any board member who wants to move any item from consent to agenda, from consent to discussion? Is there any public comment on consent?
We have none, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Can I have a motion on consent?
Move consent.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question on approving the consent agenda. Mr. Spotswood?
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron? Yes. I'm going to vote yes. Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Colonel Rowan?
Yes.
Mr. Steinle?
Yes.
Thanks. Consent passes unanimously. We'll move now to our one discussion item. And Mr. Rogers.
Morning, board members. Leroy Rogers, I'm the administrator for the district's vegetation management section, and today I'm presenting on agenda item 17, which requests authorization to enter into agreements for the supply and delivery of wetland plants used in our stormwater treatment areas. Before discussing the procurement itself, I'd like to briefly explain why these plants are so important and how the agreements that we're asking for will support our STA mission. So as you're aware, the district is fully engaged with improving the quality of water entering the Everglades. We now have over 64,000 acres of stormwater treatment areas that are designed to sequester excess nutrients from our surface waters, and another 19,000 acres of flow equalization basins that further optimize STA performance. Of course, vegetation is fundamental to how the STAs remove nutrients from our surface water, and today I'm focusing specifically on emergent vegetation, plants such as cattail shown here, and giant bulrush there, and alligator flag. These are all rooted plant species that grow through and above the water column, and they have many important functions in our STAs. Of course, they uptake nutrients themselves, but they also help distribute the water evenly across the treatment cell, and thereby increasing the residence time of the water. They also stabilize sediments and protect our SAV beds, and they also provide habitat for the microbial communities that help sequester those nutrients from the water column. So in most cases, emergent plant species establish naturally, which is our preferred cost-effective approach to cultivating this vegetation, but there are situations where natural recruitment alone is not enough. There are several conditions where emergent vegetation either does not establish or it's lost over time. Some areas are just simply too deep for the emergent vegetation that we are seeking to colonize naturally. And in other cases, the prolonged flooding or other storm-related disturbances can weaken established beds, causing the soil to separate or delaminate. And this causes the vegetation to break free, forming floating tussocks. Once that happens, These tussocks eventually decline. We lose all the vegetation. We're left with open water that's often turbid and just reduces the overall effect of nutrient sequestration. Photos here from 2013 to 2020 show that progression over time, where we had a significant delamination event of cattail. Another challenge is the development of short circuits or preferential flow paths. Once water finds a pathway through a gap in weak emergent vegetation, it tends to bypass much of the treatment area, and of course that reduces the residence time and ultimately reduces our treatment performance. Unfortunately, once short circuits, like you see in the photograph here, form, they don't recover naturally, and that requires us to come in and actively replant to recover that and close up those flowways. We've also learned that establishing emergent vegetation is an important part of our STA startup and refurbishment projects. When a new treatment cell is constructed or an existing cell is regraded, establishing vegetation quickly helps to stabilize the soil, especially at the outflow and inflow areas where water velocities are high, and also helps to accelerate the grow-in period, because after we do one of these actions, it does take some time for the vegetation to establish before we can flow through. Another important lesson came from the 2004 and 2005 hurricane seasons. At the time, many of the downstream STA cells were managed primarily for submerged aquatic vegetation because of its exceptional performance in removing phosphorus. However, the hurricanes of those 2 years showed us that extensive SAV beds without emergent vegetation are very vulnerable to the high wind wave action. This photo that you see here was taken after Hurricane Wilma, and it shows the large amounts of SAV that were pushed onto the levee during the storm. You can also see the extensive erosion that occurred because of a lack of any protective emergent vegetation. So that experience really changed how we manage these systems, and today we strategically incorporate emergent vegetation into these downstream cells to help buffer the wind waves and stabilize the sediments and protect the SAV beds. So this slide is illustrating our general planting strategy that we use in the SAV dominant downstream cells. We establish, looking at number 1 there on the map, we establish these dense beds of emergent vegetation at the outflow where we have the highest velocity, and we want to reduce any erosion right adjacent to our water quality sampling points. On number 2, you can see that we plant bands of vegetation perpendicular to the direction of flow, and that helps to compartmentalize the SAV beds and promote more even flow distribution. And they also have an added benefit that they limit the spread of the harmful floating invasive plants that we have to control in these systems. The result is a more resilient treatment cell, one that better protects submerged aquatic vegetation while promoting the desired hydrologic conditions. So over the last 10 years, my team has worked to implement a number of adaptive management projects to address these challenges. We began by testing different wetland species to determine which species perform best in our STA environment. Once we identified those successful species, we established on-site nurseries using small purchase orders, bringing in plants from outside providers. Once those nurseries were established, we then would thin the nurseries and then outplant the harvested biomass to areas that needed the emergent vegetation. And this program has proven to be very successful, and it's now a major part of our veg management program. In fact, it's now roughly half or sometimes more of our annual budget for vegetation management in the STAs. And that's what brings us to today's request. So rather than solely harvesting plants from within the STAs, we're proposing to supplement our supply by purchasing plants from qualified vendors. This approach will provide us with 3 important benefits. First, it allows our ground services contractors to spend their time planting rather than harvesting, effectively doubling the planting rate. Second, it minimizes the disturbance associated with that harvesting. When we go in and harvest, we have a lot of labor workers and airboats in there pulling that material out, and we obviously want to minimize how much disturbance is happening in those cells. And third, based on our experience and the vendor pricing, we can accomplish this with essentially no increase in cost per planted unit, and in some cases, depending on the species and the specific vendor pricing, have it done at a lower cost than our old method. So I want to briefly show you how the process works. Once the plants are delivered to the STA, they're staged along the levee. From there, our ground services contractors will take over, where they transport the plants by airboat to the designated planting areas. The contractors will manually install bare root plants at the prescribed spacing. The crew that you see here is planting giant bulrush. It's one of our favorite species because we found it to be particularly effective for deep water and is very resistant to that tussock formation that I talked about. The result is a rapid establishment of healthy vegetation over large areas, as shown here at STA 1 East Cell 6, where we were having trouble getting vegetation established. And here's another approach we've taken when planting open water areas where emergent vegetation has completely failed to colonize. We have a combination of parallel and diagonal vegetation bands, and that serves two purposes. First, it compartmentalizes the open water and gets that nice even flow through the flowway. But by doing it diagonally, we also can control some of the wind wave run up that from multiple wind directions as the seasons go by. Let's see, this short video shows one of our planting crews. Let's see if it goes, there it is. One of our planting crews at work. You'll notice that they're able to move pretty quickly through the area, and as it pans, you'll see just how large of an area they've planted. And they just carry these bundles of buoyant bare root plants with them and pop them in the ground. It's a pretty simple process, but we found it's a very efficient way for us to get emergent vegetation where we're otherwise failing to get it to grow. So looking ahead over the next 3 years, we anticipate significant planting needs associated with both planned refurbishment and vegetation enhancement efforts throughout the STA system. The exact acreage will vary depending on project schedules and any unforeseen vegetation damage that requires repair. But having multiple qualified vendors on hand will give us the flexibility to respond quickly as those needs arise. And with that, staff is requesting governing board authorization to enter into one-year agreements with 2 one-year renewals for the 4 firms listed here for the supply and delivery of wetland plants to the district stormwater treatment areas. Total authorization is not to exceed $10 million over 3 years, subject to governing board approval and the applicable annual budgets. And I would point out that this is not a request to expend additional $10 million. This will be work done in our existing planned budget.
Thanks very much. Molly, are there any public comment on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with Newton Cook, followed by Mark Perry.
Newton Cook, United Waterfowlers. I certainly don't have any problem with the emergent plantings, but if you think that's going to get you to beat Q-Bell, you're just fooling yourself. Cattails are the emergent plant that's naturally there. Way too many of them because of water coming in from the north from the lake. When they put lake water in the SDAs in 2016, I think it was, destroyed the SDAs as they were functioning at the time. They were about 18 parts per billion and headed down. And the brilliant idea of running lake water into the SDAs because of the political situation over on the East Coast destroyed the SDAs. I'll never forget Dr. Susan Gray. We told her, and she agreed, that if we put the lake water into the SDAs, it was going to turn them around. Well, it did. But that's not where we can do anything about today. These emergent plants are wonderful, but they will never get you to Q-Bell. The only plant that will get you to Q-Bell, I hate to say it, is hydrilla. It was the one that was working before, and it's the one that works anywhere you let it grow. You can plant all the bulrush you want, and you're not going to lower the parts per billion phosphorus any more than a good stand of cattails. So, diverting the water, building walls of emergent vegetation so that the hurricanes don't do quite the damage to the SDAs. But Lake Okeechobee, hurricane comes along, it just rolls up all those emergent plants, just rolls them up. I can take you on the lake and show you a berm that you needed dynamite in order to get the emergent vegetation redistributed or off. We call emergent vegetation grass lines in the real Everglades. We hunt all along the grass lines. That's wonderful. Between the grass lines is hydrilla. I know people hate hydrilla, but hydrilla is the best thing that ever happened to cleaning water in Florida. It is the only plant that will clean the water to 13 parts per billion. What do you think cleans the water south of the SDAs all the way down to Florida Bay? It's not bulrush. It's not the grass. It's the submerged aquatic vegetation. And the only submerged aquatic vegetation that will grow for free, won't cost you $1, and only requires some management around structures, and certainly not in the middle of a marsh, is let the hydrilla grow. In fact, you probably ought to plant some of it, because it will get you to Q-bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. We'll hear next from Mark Perry.
Morning, Governor Mark Perry. On this subject particularly, I was interested in looking back at, and I found the original, this is the annual report for the district back in 1995 annual report. And of course, at the time, reporting on the Everglades construction project. That was the original 44,000 acres of STAs. 6 STAs that were the original at the bottom of the EA. Those were kind of required, of course, under the Everglades Forever Act, that we build those in order to treat that runoff as it goes south to the Everglades because of the pollution coming off the basin runoff there. So that happened because of that act, but then also required, we expanded the STAs under the restoration strategies and included FEBs and other kind of treatment areas. And we also expanded our kind of efforts in the Talisman purchase back in 1999. If you recall, we bought about almost 55,000 acres there through the Talisman sugar purchase, and components A, B, and C became expansions of STAs, as well as the availability of the EA reservoir on component A. So we've expanded these STAs and done this over time. And Florida started with over 20 million acres of wetlands back prior to 1850. But in 1850, of course, the Swamp and Overflowed Lands Act was passed, and Congress conveyed over to the state 20 million acres and basically began to drain it, to reclaim it for development. So we lost about 9 million acres over these years of those wetlands, of those Everglades. And particularly, of course, the 700,000 acres south of the lake, the EAA, has been continuously drained for that agricultural purpose. Our goal, hopefully, is to restore all of that back to Everglades. Everglades does the treatment that is needed as that river of grass is to move south. We truly need to continue to build these STAs, to support them with more planting, to buy more land and get more STAs in place. We need to restore the lost Everglades. We need to restore that river of grass, because that's the natural treatment of that water as it moves south from Lake Okeechobee to the tip of Florida. So I appreciate this movement to get these plants back into play here and to continue to maintain. It costs about $22 million a year to maintain these STAs, but it's well worth it, and we hope we can continue to make it work. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Mr. Chairman, we have no additional public comments on this item.
Well, thank you both for your comments. Mr. Rogers, I've got a quick question for you, and it has to do with mortality rates after you plant these. Do these things live pretty well or not?
Yeah, they do very well. It can be a little hit and miss. We do require a bit of a grow-in period. It varies with the site. 6 to 18 months is kind of the typical range where we need to have restricted flow through those flowways. But we've kind of got dialed in. We've learned which plants are very successful. Some of the plants like alligator flag we found maybe decline and have a little bit more mortality, but for the most part we get very high survivorship with especially giant bulrush.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Hurley?
Quick question. You mentioned that in some instances it's actually cheaper to acquire material and plant it as opposed to transplanting.
Mhm.
Can you go into it a little bit?
Well, sure. So our ground services contract, we built into the scope harvesting
Mhm.
plants and transporting them. And obviously that's labor intensive.
Okay.
And so we did the math and looked at what it's costing us per acre to harvest that material and then take it to the next site and compared that up against what these RFB prices came in at and determined that it was about equal. But again, we have a few vendors that had some pretty competitive pricing for giant bulrush in particular. And assuming that company is able to provide us with ample supply, it looks like we can actually save some money with this approach.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Spotswood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard Mr. Cook mention that in some places, cattails, I think you mentioned, were they're too dense, maybe. Is there any downside, or was there any benefit from us harvesting some of these plants from some of our lands, either to maintain the appropriate amount of density? Do these plants get so thick that they can cause harm to each other? Is there any downside to using new plants coming in rather than harvesting?
Or are you suggesting from other district lands where we may have cattail growing?
Mhm.
Well, we could do that. I think, number one, that would probably create quite a bit of disturbance in those areas, and so we'd have to look at that. But knowing that plant very well, I've studied cattail for most of my career here. Thinning it out is not going to help much beyond a few months. It will rapidly grow right back into those spaces, so I'm not sure you'd have the impact you're looking for.
Anyone else? Comments or questions?
I have a comment.
Mr. Bergeron?
All these plants absorbing the nutrients, does it come a point in time where you have to replant? They can only absorb so much over a certain time frame?
Well, at the individual plant level, not so much, but these systems are surface water systems, so they take a beating sometimes, especially if we have major storm events, and they are getting decades of hydraulic and nutrient loading. There, as a system, there could be a time where we need to come in and do refurbishments, kind of reset the clock, if you will. We tend to manage these things in a steady state as an open marsh, and these communities want to succeed to, different things like a willow swamp, for example, is a common direction that these communities go in. And so as those nutrients and sediments build up, there may be a time where we need to come in and do a rebalancing, if you will, go in with bulldozers, level it back out and reset the clock. The time frame is going to vary depending on the STA, a number of conditions, including that historic loading rate of nutrients and the water. We've had some cells that have lasted maybe just 12 years, I think. Thinking of STA 1 West Cell 4 that kind of shot out pretty quickly. We have other cells that have been going for more than 20 years, so it really depends on the conditions.
Probably has a lot to do with the inflows, the level of nutrients coming in.
Yeah, the nutrient
well.
loading rate's a big factor for sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no further comments or questions, if I could get a motion for Resolution 2026-0805.
So moved.
Thanks. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks. I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? I'm hearing none. I'm going to call that question. Mr. Spotswood?
Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Colonel Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Steinley?
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously, and that concludes that item. We'll move now to technical reports with Mr. Mitnick and Dr. Armstrong.
All right. Morning, board members. So we'll start where we always do with looking back at the rainfall distribution the past couple of months. You can see there for July, also ran a deficit, so that's 2 months in a row we've been running that deficit. So far for August, we've gotten some rains, but there's still a fair amount to go. Typically, August, as you can see here, is the second or third highest month of rainfall during the year. So what that has done, looking at the wet season overall, and this will come as no surprise to anyone, running a deficit of rainfall below normal, about 3.5 inches below normal of what we would typically expect by this time of year. With the driest portion, Mr. Spotswood can probably attest to, is just a little bit more than half the rainfall down in the Keys that they typically get during the wet season. So looking at where we are with the lakes, you can see for East Lake and West Lake, they both started rising. They have gotten some rain up there in the upper basins, and they're both started rising up to their regulation schedule. So that's encouraging. As I talked about last month, once they start getting up to those regulation schedules, then that water will start moving down the system from lake to lake and eventually start accumulating down here in the Kissimmee Cypress Hatchenhall group, which is this graphic over here. Right now you can see that water management group amongst those three lakes is down in the lower portions of its schedule. There's only probably about 150-ish, 160 cubic feet per second coming out of Lake Kissimmee going down the river itself. And Cassandra will talk a little bit more about what those conditions look like.
So as Mr. Micknick mentioned, we're still waiting for the water to rise in the lakes before we get discharge. So right now we're at averaging 150 CFS coming down the lake, and as you can see, the floodplain is still quite dry and is at the same level that it was a month ago at about a third of a foot. And compared to last year, you can see the difference. It was at a half a foot, over a half a foot, and we had quite a bit of blue areas. We're not seeing that yet, but with the recent rains, we're hoping that water will start flowing south. As you can see in this upper graph here, we've had really low flows for quite a while now. They are well below the bank full level of 1,500 or 1,400 CFS, so it will be a while before we start seeing those levels rise up to the level where they can start outflowing the banks and going out onto the floodplain. But we are seeing some weather moving into that area, as this beautiful picture taken by one of my staff. And so hopefully those will come soon and start rehydrating the system. One of the benefits of low flow is that the dissolved oxygen concentration in the channel has remained well above the area of concern for aquatic animals.
So the story continues when you look at the overall regional system and how water's been moved around. Coming into Lake Okeechobee, we're still so far for the water year, going back to May 1st, we're still less than 100,000 acre feet have actually come into Lake Okeechobee. That's why you still haven't really seen any appreciable changes in the lake stage from last month when we were here to this month. We're on the East Coast. No water has been moved out of C44 basin to the estuary. For the most part, that water is flowing back into Lake Okeechobee, so it contributes to that 74,000 acre feet that have gone into Lake Okeechobee. With the upper East Coast, not a whole lot of rainfall up there, which hasn't been really generating all that much runoff. You can see only just a little more than 10,000 acre feet from C23-24 basins to the estuary, and just over 20,000 acre feet out the Fort Pierce area to the Indian River Lagoon. Over on the West Coast, just a little bit more than 100,000 acre feet in total, although they did get some rain this past week, so those flows increased. I think the 30-day average, Cassandra will probably talk about it a little bit more later, is up around 800 cubic feet per second for that last 30 days. But about a little more than 21,000 acre feet having originated back in Lake Okeechobee due to the low levels that are in the lake itself. So looking at the lake projections, this graphic looks a lot different than the one that we showed last month. So I'll just jump to the next one so you can see the last 4 months and how it's evolved over time. So last month I was talking about the 50% line there, somewhere coming out of the wet season, a little bit less than 13 feet-ish right in this neighborhood. But now when you jump down to this month's projection, with the drier weather that we've experienced over the month of July, barring probably a tropical wave or a tropical system, we're probably going to remain within the water shortage management band for the duration of this wet season. So again, the story continues to be what happens out here once we get into the dry season and that super El Nino that is being forecast. It continues to intensify, and all indications at this point in time that it could be the strongest El Nino on record. But we'll keep an eye on that situation as it evolves. But the projections are still pointing towards that super El Nino, and that's quite frankly what we would need in order to sustain the regional system through the remainder of the dry season, getting a couple of those good wet months. But those rains, you'll see it towards the end of my presentation, really aren't starting to develop until you get into the December and January timeframe out here, because it's going to take a while for the lake to start filling back up given its current stage. And like I was talking earlier about the upper chain of lakes, for them to fill up and start shedding water down the system.
So for the month of July, we had more flowing out primarily through evaporation than we did coming in. So the lake dropped about 0.05 feet, not that much. We're pretty much hitting a balance. But as was mentioned, we did have some recent rains where a lot of water came into the lake. And that did impact lake stage just a scooch right there. But what happened primarily is that the water went into the western marsh where it sucked it up like a sponge. You see a little tiny bit of hydration change between last month and this month over in that area in the western marsh, but there has been minimal impact on stage. It's been fairly level. As was mentioned, we are in the water shortage management band. We're also well below the ecological envelope, and probably will continue to be. This is one of the driest years we've had on record, being just above the 2011 situation. For the water quality conditions within the lake, we have had minimal chlorophyll blooms. We have had, and recently, a little bit of nearshore activity, but it's since come back down. But from an algal bloom perspective, it's been very moderate throughout the entire wet season. That a little bit of algal bloom, as well as the SAV that's now growing quite well on the nearshore area, has kept the dissolved inorganic nitrogen levels quite low. And so there's no fertilizer to fuel the blooms, so that's a good thing. And turbidity has also remained fairly low. We've had a couple of wind events with storms, but otherwise it's staying quite low, which is good for the SAV that we planted. As mentioned, the bloom activity has been quite moderate throughout most of the wet season. You are seeing a little bit on the edges here, which is that nearshore area. There's a couple of little hot spots down here, but for the most part, the lake is really good condition for the algae. These results are for algae, and the toxins are from July 2025. We have had a more recent sampling, but the lab results are not quite in yet. I got a little bit of update on the toxin levels for you. But back in late July, we had a couple of sites that had some high concentrations. S77 was pretty high, near the center was high, but the toxin concentrations have all been quite low and well below the recreational threshold, and some are just above detection. You may have heard in the news recently that there was a health warning that was issued for over in this area of the lake for some toxins. There were 3 toxins samples that were collected. 2 of them were just above detection. There were 0.01 micrograms per liter above detection, and the other one was 3.1 milligrams per liter, again, well below the recreational threshold. Moving over to the St. Lucie, they've had 734 CFS flow this past week, and they've had a couple of intermittent storms which have kept the salinity in the optimum range for adult oysters, and the salinity gradient has moved just a little bit further downstream, just around the corner there, but we are in good condition salinity-wise throughout the estuary. And that has done wonders for our oyster recruitment. We're seeing some really good numbers coming in. Salinity's at the optimum range at US 1 Bridge, and so we're seeing a lot of recruitment. One of the good sides of the salinity being in the optimum range is that it is probable that these new oyster are going to survive into adulthood. The conditions are optimum for that. And continuing on with the good news, we have just recently completed our seagrass surveys on the east and west coast. And just like the St. John's has been reporting, the IRL is continuing to increase. in the percent cover of seagrass that we are seeing. So the IRL for us is from the Fort Pierce Inlet down to the Jupiter Inlet, and it is mostly Serengodium that has been coming in. Looking at the St. Lucie estuary itself, we have started to see an improvement in the seagrass in the area. We saw a very nice bump in water year 2026, mostly Haladuli. And while we did see a decline in percent cover this past year, it's actually still good news in that we've actually increased our species number. We're getting more diversity in our seagrass, so it's nice and healthy and resilient, and we hope to see that trend continue. Moving over to the Caloosahatchee, as was mentioned, they got some rainfall, so you see that nice little peak there. They got over 2,427 CFS last week. Almost all of that came from the basins. Only 16 CFS came from the lake, and that pushed the salinity gradient further downstream, as you can see here, which is a good thing. You can see the salinities in the lower estuary declined, although the Shell Point and Sanibel are still in the upper stress range for adult oysters. The oysters over there are doing okay. We're seeing some good spat recruitment, especially at Shell Point. But again, here the key is going to be the salinity. And while the recruitment of oysters prefers higher salinities, their survivability requires those lower salinities between 10 and 25. So getting the salinities in these key areas down below 25 will be crucial. Higher salinities tend to encourage predation as well as disease formation. And the seagrass story over on the Caloosahatchee is not quite as rosy, but not dire. So in water year 2023, we had Hurricane Ian come through, and it really did a number on that estuary as far as seagrass, and we lost a lot of seagrass coverage during that time. The estuary has continued to come back from that and recover, and we feel like we're in a good stable state right now with the seagrass coverage. One thing to note in the upper estuary, and that is Fort Myers up to S79, we've seen very little to no seagrass in that area. We did notice Rupia in that area. Rupia has a wide salinity tolerance range from 0 to 25. We did see coverage of that. It's a very wispy species, so percent cover is still low, even though it's there. There was no vallisneria in that area. And in the lower estuary, we're seeing a stabilization of the different species that are present, and we are seeing an uptick in Haladuli wrightii, which is great news because that is wonderful habitat for fish. And in regards to salinity in the upper estuary, we're seeing the salinities come down quite nicely, and we can finally say that the Fort Myers area is now in the stressed range instead of the damaging range, which is still not ideal for vallisneria, but it begins to allow opportunity for recruitment. And in regards to the minimum flows and levels, we are now at about 700 for the 30-day average, and we are continuing to be above the minimum flow of 457.
So looking at the southern portion of the system and water movement there, again, the same old broken record story that not a whole lot of rainfall, not a lot of water moving around. But for the conservation areas this past month, just a little over 46,000 acre feet have flowed into the water conservation areas, considering all three of them, with only a little bit less than 40,000 acre feet then coming down into Everglades National Park, inclusive of some of that return seepage over here on the eastern side. The most movement of water, as you can expect, has occurred along the urbanized lower East Coast with those afternoon rainstorms. We are still getting a lot of those typical afternoon rainstorms, especially a little bit here in the southern portion of the system, which contributes to that roughly 360,000+ acre feet of runoff that has gone to the intercoastal and down into Biscayne Bay. So again, for the stormwater treatment areas, there haven't been a whole lot of inflows. Not a lot of water has been processed through the stormwater treatment areas due to the lack of rainfall and runoff. So they've only processed about 74,000 acre feet so far this water year.
All right, as John says, there hasn't been a lot of water running through our STAs, but what has come through has mostly been going to STA 2 with 37,000 acre feet. Very little lake flow has come into the STAs in recent due to not sending regulatory down to the STAs. One thing I would really like to point out is our numbers for total phosphorus. You can see our inflow concentrations, except for STA 5.6, have been quite modest, which is very nice for the production or the productivity of the STAs, and these numbers here look amazing. So we are very excited to be able to present those numbers to you. STA 5.6 has not had a lot of outflow, so we don't have numbers yet that we can report for STA 5.6 outflow concentrations, and there's a very good reason for that, which I will show you in the next slide. Most of the cells that we are seeing that are operational are at or slightly above target stage. As mentioned, there is not a lot of water in the system. What this graph shows you is the inflows and outflows that we have experienced since water year 2019, from the start of the wet season to current, which is August 9th. And you can see that just with the wet season flows, we are still very much below where we have been even in just recent years. So that has really impacted how we have been operating the STAs. But with that, we have been able to maintain the hydrology and keep them at current stage, even with limited water quantity. So that is a great job for our water managers. I also wanted to point out that STA 5.6 is starting to get rehydrated, and that's where the water is going. So we are having some flow come into that STA, but we're holding it, and that's to get these cells rehydrated. Flowway 4 and 5, as you can see, they still have some areas that are dry, but that quantity of cell that is now hydrated is drastically improved. I also want to point out the two red boxes. This goes to the vegetation management activities that Mr. Leroy talked about, Mr. Rogers, excuse me. Those flowways are offline for vegetation management activities. Those areas have been replanted, and as he mentioned, it takes 6 to 8 months for that grow-in to occur, and that is what's happening in those cells. So for Ms. Colonel Roman, she had asked for a more in-depth evaluation of how we calculate our annual flow-weighted mean concentration. So I showed this slide to you in June, but let me just go through it real quick as a refresher on how we calculate the concentrations that we are reporting. So the first step to do an annual flow-weighted mean is to calculate the loads on a daily time step. So we look at our daily flow volume, which is in acre feet, and we multiply that by our TP concentration, which is in parts per billion or micrograms per liter. And that gives you a daily load, which is in kilograms. We then sum all of those total loads over the year, and we sum all of the flows, again in acre feet, for the year, divide them, and that gives you your annual flow-weighted mean concentration. So let me show you STA2's numbers for water year 2026. And the reason for this is it'll keep it simple because there's only two outflow structures, G335 and G436. And so for G335, the total for the year was a little over 1,000 kilograms of load with 6,300 or 1,000 acre feet. You do the math, you get 15 parts per billion. For G364, we had 2,000 with 107 acre feet 1,000 outflow with a flow-weighted mean concentration of 17. So now we put the two structures together. The 1,100 here goes here, the 2 on E200 goes here, etc. for the loads, and you get a nice 16 parts per billion. So that got us to in the Q-Bell range for 2026. Where are we now? So you can do this calculation for a partial year. So we've got May 1 to August 9th. So we're just looking at the daily loads and summing over that time frame. For G335, we're currently at 18 parts per billion when you do the math. 436, we're at 14 parts per billion. And when you sum that all up, that is the 16 parts per billion I showed you in the slides a couple previous. I did want to caveat that this math is doing a shortcut, because what we are doing here is the parts per billion, as I mentioned, was micrograms per liter. And I'm showing you kilograms per acre feet. So there's a lot of conversions that are happening in the background, but trust me, that math is legit. You're just seeing it boiled down to its basics. Now moving on to the Everglades, we are starting to see some rainfall in that area, which has improved water depths throughout the system compared to last month and the previous month. So you're seeing a lot more blues and yellows. When it's blue and yellow, that means it's above ground. Oranges and reds are below ground. However, we still have a lot of areas that are in the oranges and reds, and that is impacting ecosystem function, including risk of soil oxidation and peat fires, vegetation, and most importantly, prey production for the wading birds. We are seeing some increased connectivity to Florida Bay through the sloughs, so that is some good news. However, compared to the percentiles for this time over the 20-year period, we are still quite low. So the blues that you are seeing in the right graph, those are about half a foot of water depth. Normally at this time of year, we're 1.5 feet to 2 feet of depth. So we are still well below what we would normally be seeing at this time of year, and we are in the 10th to 20th percentile throughout the region. So to dig into that a little deeper, for the upper part in Water Conservation Area 1 and Conservation Area 2, this is just a blow up here of the graph that you just saw with this is the water depths and this is the percentile. And as you can see, we are seeing a lot of blue, which is really good. And this is going to be very important for the upcoming wading bird season because prey production is occurring in this area. So it is key to keep water in this area so that the birds will have something to forage on, even though it is below its normal levels. It is key to keep the water in that system. And looking at this specific sites, you can see all of them are just at the bottom of the 10th percentile. Also wanted to point out Site 7. This red line here is the current regulation schedule. You can see we're just a tick above it. And this line here is the proposed regulation schedule under set point 1, and we are a foot below that proposed schedule. Moving down to 3A, you can see compared to, again, this is the same graphs that you saw before. This is just this month and this is last month. So you can see that the conditions in that area are improving. We're seeing a lot more blues and yellows, which is great. However, if you look at where we wanted to be, our stages are well below the 10th percentile. And I wanted to draw your attention to Site 63, where the North Alley Colony is. This little red tick right there, that is our target for the ibis for when they begin their foraging and nesting season. As you can see, there's about a 3-foot difference between where we are and where we want to be in a couple of months. So it's a huge level of water that would need to enter in that system to become suitable for the Alley North Colony, which is why keeping 2A hydrated is so important, because that's what the Alley North Colony is going to rely on, because the prey is not going to be here. And moving down to Florida Bay, we are seeing that the stages in Taylor Slough have declined over the past week a little bit, and we are about 5 inches below where we would want to be. As a result, salinity has ticked up throughout the bay, and the average is 41.5, which is above the hypersalinity threshold. As you can see on this graph over here, we are above the threshold in both the central and western, and we are just at the eastern section. So that is of concern, and we're keeping our eye on it. One key parameter in regards to seagrass health is temperature. And we've been very fortunate in that the temperature right now is where it is normally average temperature. We're not seeing those high spikes like we did previous years. So it is likely that the risk for seagrass die-off is low.
So Cassandra already touched on it for the most part, but just for the conservation areas, you can see some of the rains are starting to develop over Area 1 and Area 2, but Area 3 continues to just bounce around the floor elevation, which is sort of this tan line that comes across. The blue line is the 3-gauge average. The floor is measured by this green line here. So we're just kind of bouncing around the floor elevation for Area 3, and if you recall, that's the requirement when you get below the floor elevation, then any water that leaves the conservation area has got to be preceded by some inflows from the north. So we typically start that accounting and keep track of all the water as it moves in and out of the water conservation areas. But regardless, we're still trying to keep up and meet the Tamiami Trail flow formula for flows out of 3A and into the park. Right this week it's calling for about 430 cubic feet per second. So we're trying to meet that as best we can, utilizing S12D as well as the two 333 structures that deliver water into the L29. For the most part, the South Dig conveyance system is pretty stable. Most of those gates are closed. We're returning some of the seepage, operating some of the seepage pump stations over there on the eastern side of the park. We did have a failure at 332C of the discharge pipes. I think it was last week that occurred, so the field station crews have jumped right on top of it. You'll recall we scraped down that entire flowway some time ago due to those failing pipes. Well, we left a short section of it right close to the pump station, and now that section has also failed. So like I said, the field station jumped on it, and they're being proactive and ripping the rest of the pipes out, and so we can continue to get that station back in operation as quickly as possible. So thanks to them for jumping right on it. Overall, mentioned it earlier, the forecast from the Climate Prediction Center, they're still looking at that Super El Nino. I can tell you from the briefing I got earlier this week that district meteorologists think that although the October through December timeframe is still showing signs of above average rainfall, the heavier rains that we talk about for the Super El Nino is probably going to manifest more in the December, January, February timeframe is when we'll start seeing the bulk of those heavier rains. And there's really a bullseye if you look at those projections and forecasts for Florida, well, not only Florida, but also the southeastern portion of the U.S. As we get out past December and then into January. But for the next 2 weeks, right now it's looking for much below normal rainfall. So it looks like it'll be a good boating day on Saturday well, at least on the East Coast. Mr. Goss will probably have to wait till Sunday over on the West Coast. And with that, I'll return it to you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you both very much for that. Are there any comments or questions? Yeah, I've got one real quick, John. The spaghetti chart you show, that one. So does that, your 50% there, that includes the Super El Nino?
Yes, it does. So this version of it, when we switched, I guess it's almost been a year now, to this conditional projection analysis and this preferred scenario, it is climate informed, and that's what each of these bars up above it represent.
Okay. So if we don't, if the Super El Nino does not pan out, then this is all going to shift down.
It will be a very different conversation, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Charlotte.
Yes, go ahead, Charlotte.
I wanted to reach out and thank Cassandra for that excellent explanation for how the combined flow weighted mean is calculated. I really appreciate it because I understood what you were doing, and that takes a lot to have that highly technical information distilled for an average a person like me. So thank you very much for that, and I understand it much better.
Mr. Bergeron.
So it looks like we're gonna have, in the dry season, you're predicting an awful lot of rain.
Yes, we are. So I put it in terms of super El Nivo, but for those of you that have been around for a while, to put it into context, this is projected to be higher than what 1998 was or what 2018 was.
The one thing I've always seen, we normally dealing with high water events, 9 out of every 10 years. When I look, and I've had concerns about 2A, 2B, as we go into the future, what's the purpose of the levee that separates those two? I know we're connecting 3A south to 3B. It would seem like you'd have more of a natural system if you connect 2A to 2B, and the water's flowing obviously south, keeping the ridge and slough in 2A and 2B. Do we have any plans in regards to that, John? Because I know I don't think there's any avenues for water to leave 2B.
Let me try to find a
At
graphic
this
to
point.
be able to answer your question, but while I'm searching for it, no, there really isn't. So those intermediate levees, so you're talking about this one right here in
Yeah.
area 2A going into area 2B, and then the L67 coming down from 3A separating 3B. So first I'll start at the southern portion. As you mentioned, we're connecting into the Blue Shanty Flowway. Drew touched on it earlier. Hopefully we'll have a construction contract for the board to consider to kick off that under the new 1043 efforts here in the coming months. We're reconstructing another levee right here as part of that project, and then the Corps has already and just about almost finished with a series of culverts that will move that water from 3A into the flowway with the newly constructed levee. But the remaining portion of 3B just has a structure right here and another one that'll be just north of that levee to move some water from 3A into 3B. There are a couple culverts down here at the bottom of 3B that let water out of 3B into the L29, but just because of the way water level, headwater, tailwater, we're hardly ever able to use those because you don't get 3B high enough to be able to move that water into the L29 because it would be detrimental to the ecology in area 3B. So there are ways to move water as you talk about in and out. Primarily it comes in through this structure here and then out down Miami River. So then jumping up to area 2A, there are a series of culverts, 3 culverts, that's 143, 44, and 45, that separate are in this levee that separates area 2A from 2B, and we do operate them. The purpose of both this levee and the L67s, they're step-down levees. So when the conservation areas were designed back in the 50s and 60s, they decided to have an intermediate levees, which is what these are, as a step down so you could have higher water levels. Again, not me, but 1950s thinking that they were reservoirs. You're going to have higher water levels in 3A and in 2A, and then step it down into 2B and 3B, and then allow that seepage, which is primarily, there is no outlet from area 2B as you referenced. There's a very small one here, but it's hardly ever used. It's primarily that seepage and the maintenance of those water levels to stack up the groundwater and supply that groundwater as you move off into what is, from a water supply perspective, service area 2, Broward County.
But when you have the EAA reservoir, you have guaranteed surplus water to move south if needed. You wouldn't have to hold these high water levels in 2A and 2B like we've been doing above the schedule. Am I correct? Once that is
Well, yeah,
done?
once you get the EAA reservoir up here and you have that storage of water, water will come out of the reservoir and be distributed down the central flow path. So it'll be distributed through the A2 STA, of course, but STA 3, 4, and a portion of it into STA 2. That's what the SEP North project feature is about, to be able to take some of that water that comes from the reservoir and directed to Area 2 and then redirect it over here to the northwest corner of Area 3A so it can have that sheet flow down the central and then to get down into the Blue Shanty Flowway and keep coming down into Everglades National Park. So it's not so much generating that flow through Area 2. The S11s will still operate. The historic flow path came down through Area 2, kept going through 2B and out into Weston and Coral Springs before it started coming back this way. So that's what really cut off that flow through Area 2B is all of the urbanized areas over here. Now it comes into 2A, goes through the S11s into 3A. SEP North will redirect a lot of that and try to get it back over here to the northwest corner to have the historic sheet flow across 3A down through the flowway and into the park.
Okay, so there is a connection. Do we ever open those gates? And what is that, from Atlantic Boulevard across to Sawgrass?
Yeah, we'll do water supply right here out of S38 to Broward County. We will operate 143, 44, and 45 early on in the wet season to try to fill up, and actually part of the dry season as well, try to fill up Area 2B to get that induction of groundwater movement to supply the well fields for the urbanized area. And we keep that head gradient coming from 2B into this groundwater seeping across to the lower East Coast.
Yeah, my only point is I know you're balancing water supply with compatible water levels with the environment. It's a balancing act. But when you got the storage of water in the EAA, it would seem like we can manage these areas without such high water levels that have affected the wildlife in that geographical area. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the purpose, and Cassandra touched on it a little bit. That's the purpose of the proposed regulation schedule for Area 2A under SEP 1.0 is to get a schedule that is more ecologically friendly to the entire area of 2A and not just one portion of it. As we've talked about before, that northern portion tends to dry out a lot, where you'll have pond water down in the southern portion. So the newer schedule that she had on one of the subsequent slides from this one shows how right now we would be below schedule, and that schedule being more ecologically friendly for Area 2A.
Well, it's natural you're going to dry out to the north before the south, because you know the topographical elevations as you go to Florida Bay are dropping. But I'm hoping that when we have the EAA reservoir, where we're not using 2A or 2B with water levels that are extremely high, higher than what's compatible with the plant communities and the wildlife, with that surplus guaranteed water, I think we can manage this area more compatible with wildlife and
Yes, we can. We'll
landscape.
be able to control the water coming in from the north a lot better.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no more questions, thank you both very much. Appreciate it. We'll move now to our staff reports, and Ms. Heater will give the monthly financial report.
Good morning. The monthly financial report that has been posted to the district's website under the budget and finance section is through June 30th, 2026. So through June 30th, the district thus far has collected $956 million in revenue, and we've expended $917 million. From May to June, we collected additional $50 million. That $50 million, as I mentioned each month, is dominantly in the intergovernmental revenues at $42 million, ad valorem at $5 million, and then the investment earnings, leases, permits, $3 million. Of the $956 million collected through June, $511 million is in intergovernmental revenues, $398 million from ad valorem collections, which represents a 97.8% percentage of ad valorem revenues being collected through June. $47 million from investment earnings, licenses, permits, fees, leases. So overall, we've collected about 48.3% of our revenue, but within the recurring revenues, taking out the intergovernmental, we've collected 95%, which covers your recurring expenses. Compared to this time last year, we were at about $117 million per month, and this year we're at about $106 million per month of revenue collections. And that could be timing with invoices, etc. So nothing to raise any concerns over. Approximately $770 million has been expended, or $917 million expended. Of that, we have about 89% in Everglades and O&M, about 5% within your science and water supply program, 2% within regulation, and about 4% within administration and outreach. And a note on the administration and outreach, we have a statutory threshold of 15% that we must stay under, and we're at 4%. On average, we're spending about $102 million per month. Last year we were at 99, so it's about a $3 million increase. And we're approximately 72% of our budget obligated. So that concludes my report.
Well, thanks so much. Does anyone have any comments or questions for Ms. Heater? Thanks, Kenny.
Thank you.
We'll move now to our final public comment. Molly, is there public comment?
Yes, from Ben Olson. He left. And we have one hand raised on Zoom. Nyla Pipes. We'll hear from Nyla Pipes on Zoom.
Sound check?
We hear you.
Ah, fantastic. Nyla Pipes, One Florida Foundation. Just a couple of quick things. First of all, Chairman Goss, I completely agree with you that we are due for an update on the C-43 reservoir. That is also a question I am beginning to get quite a bit of. People have been following along and they're really anxious to see where we're at with that whole process. And as far as being dry through possibly December or January, I think we need to work really hard. And I know that we spoke briefly earlier about getting ready for the next dry season, getting ready for the next time the lake is low, to continue our efforts for prescribed burns and muck removal and all of that. But I urge you to see if there's any way we can do some of this in a little bit more emergent way, since we have been granted this, I hate to call it a blessing because we all know drought isn't great, right? But take advantage of the blessing side of the drought, right? We've got a silver lining here. And I feel like it might be a number of years before we can get back to this state. So if there's anything we can do to identify some maybe more emergent funding and permitting and whatnot to get more fire and more muck removal going on Lake Okeechobee, I think we really should. So with that, I will leave you for the day. Thank you so much. Wonderful meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Pipes. Mr. Chairman, we have no additional public comment.
Oh, thanks for the comment. We'll move now to a board comment, and I'll start with, am I right?
Nothing for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Bergeron.
I always have something to say. Okay. I want to compliment our staff on the Western Everglades. All of the intense modeling and making sure that the Western Weir portion of Western Everglades, we're truly restoring the natural environment. We're restoring the Seminoles Reservation, our public lands, the Big Cypress, and private Everglades. It's all one unit. And I can't tell you how proud I am of our staff putting together the models that make sure that we're truly restoring. We've been very blessed with our governor, DeSantis, and our legislators, and the funding we've been getting to restore one of the natural wonders of the world. And it's so important that as we all work together and communicate in the solutions from our stakeholders to our federal partners to our tribes, and that we're truly restoring with this money. And I just want to compliment our staff. There's a lot going on to make sure that that area, I will be abstaining from voting on the Western Weir portion. But I'm just want to say I'm very proud of the way we're working together. And long live the Everglades.
Thanks, Mr. Bergeron. I'm going to go back to our clerk real quick. Is there? I saw one of our public commenters has returned to the room to see. Mr. Olson, do you want to say something?
I appreciate that. Sorry about that.
It's quite all right. You probably drove a long way to be here. So.
And I do want to compliment this young man. He has done an awful lot of research. I see him everywhere from the FWC to he's dedicated his life to making sure Florida has a quality of life, and very proud of you, son, for all the research. And it's not just an opinion, his opinion, but it's all the research and the data that supports his opinion. And very proud of you.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm proud of Newton Cook, too. I don't know whether he's still here, but he is, I've never seen anyone so committed. But that's what makes it so great, is all of us together, we communicating that at the end of the day, we're truly restoring the Everglades.
Alligator Bergeron is stealing all of my lines here. A normal or sane individual would probably find concern to see their name searched 14 times under a claimed criminal investigation. Unfortunately, to me, that's becoming somewhat par for the course in all of this. And I guess I'm not normal or sane because the moment I discovered this, the first thing I knew I had to do was drive 1,200 miles to speak for 6 minutes at the FWC Commission meeting in person. To inform the commissioners that I was aware of what happened and that I'd be putting in sunshine requests, but I also knew I had to invite their staff and leadership to the land steward meeting because fixing WERP takes priority. The FWC is an organization that I volunteer for at least one night a week, and like water management, I regularly deal with their staff. I hunt pythons with them, and I track panthers for them. We have 2 more kittens born on Olson Ranch this year. My aunt saw them coming out of one of our fields last week. She was confident that they are days old. That's who we're fighting for. The private properties in the West Feeder Basin are some of the most critical endangered species habitat wild Florida has left. So I fully intend to keep tracking panthers with FWC biologists, despite the tracking of me. and I'm going to continue to push for a West Feeder Canal Basin panther monitoring program. I also fully intend to ensure Everglades restoration moves into a new age, one of openness and transparency, without behind-the-scenes agendas and without illegal tracking of U.S. citizens for constitutionally protected speech. But that only occurs with everyone at the table, so I look forward to FWC's involvement next month, and I'm looking forward to standing in front of this board to tell you what a success the Land Steward meeting was. This is all coming together because we are speaking with one another. When I first went to the Seminole headquarters to have a 3-hour meeting with a stacked legal team for the tribe, I was admittedly hesitant. But we made what I believe was significant and critical progress in that meeting, as I've told you previously. When the tribe responded in writing about their commitment to work with the landowners, I was relieved. And I don't know if I'm exactly supposed to mention this publicly, but the Seminoles have invited the landowners to a meeting prior to the Land Steward meeting, just as a get-together with no specific agenda, which shows me both sincerity and that we all truly are working together to solve this. WERP is going to be a success story. It will be the success story that reverberates through Everglades restoration and will be the vanguard for openness and transparency in this process. I am incredibly disturbed about the flock tracking, and I'm very concerned about how questionable the federal government's been on releasing WERP documents to me. And admittedly, I'm a bit burned out, if I can be honest with you. It certainly doesn't pay me, and it's not cheap financially or mentally, but we're going to do it. We are going to use the Land Steward meetings to ensure the Feeder Canal Basin Water Quality Program is optimized, to solve all concerns while ensuring habitat protections. We're going to fix WERP through the Feeder Canal Basin Water Quality Program. And then we're going to use WERP as a proof of concept to involve engaged members of the public in this process, be it private landowners or individual experts on the public lands. Then we're going to establish the accountability subgroup to audit, analyze, and review, and then expedite CERP projects. It is that simple, Governing Board. I don't care what happened in the past. I don't care about the insults. I don't care about being left out of the conversation far longer than we should have been. Frankly speaking, I don't even particularly care about being tracked illegally at this point. I only care about making sure the environment is protected, and beyond that, we can accomplish anything collaboratively. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Olson.
I
Back to you,
appreciate
Mr.
letting me
Chairman.
speak. Thank you.
Welcome. We will go back to board comment, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Hurley.
I don't have anything.
Let's see, Colonel Roman,
Nothing further for me. Thank you.
Mr. Steinle.
Look forward to being with everybody in person for the September meeting.
We'll look forward to seeing you here. I don't have anything else other than to say we do have a meeting on September 10th. That's going to be our monthly board meeting. And that evening, we'll have our public hearing on the fiscal year 2026-27 tentative ad valorem millage rates, non-ad valorem tax rolls, and tentative budget. And I believe that's at 5 o'clock on that same night. So we'll look forward to seeing you all then. And this meeting's going to be adjourned. Thanks.